And here we are, what you're just looking at is the delightful sights of what was Minsden Chapel. Now, we're going to talk much more about Minsden Chapel when we're up near to it shortly, but just to give you an idea, we've driven around for quite some time trying to find the place. However, the original documents is Chaplefoot Farm, and Chaplefoot Farm is in fact now the, whatever it's called, the gun.
Rusty Gun. Thank
you, the Rusty Gun. And it's a restaurant, but the telltale sign is they've got a farm shop. So we should have stayed there. You park your car in the farm shop, you go around the back to where they have the piglets, and you follow the bridle path all the way up, quite some distance. In fact, you can see the sweating that I've been doing. Whew. But quite some distance up until you finally hit this, Minsden Chapel. A place that's been sacred for thousands of years. Yet, it brought itself into the highlights only a few hundred years ago. And we'll tell you why when we get nearer to the actual what's left of the stones. So here we are at one of the most surreal places I've been to on this quest so far, on this particular quest. We're on quest 9, we know that. We're at Minsden Chapel in Chaplefoot, which we said. Now we got into where all the steam nettles and the overgrown is, and we came in through what wouldn't have been the main entrance actually. You need to, the main entrance is literally here. And that would have been the entrance where Reginald certainly would have come into. Now, we'll talk about that in a moment, but this particular place was actually built in 1368. Why is it not on any historian map? Why? It's mentioned on Google Maps, we know that, but why has it not been preserved? Why has it not been looked after? Why has any trust not taken charge, like the parish trust, to hold on to it? The question remains why. There's so many whys. Is it because of satanic ritual that occurred here? Is it because of demonic possessions that are said for anyone that befalls upon the place? There is evidence of that, and even still, when we first walked in, the first thing I see is some kind of witchcraft altar. Now that's interesting in itself. People shouldn't find witchcraft scary. People do though, don't they, because they see the films and the horrors. But clearly, there's been someone here working at this space. I can sense it, I can feel it. Someone has definitely been working here, but sadly not for good. So that's the thing to bear in mind. But speaking of that, I have something here that's from the Minsden Chapel, the history from the internet. And one thing that's interesting is that Reginald Hine is the guy, the historian. Now Reginald Hine basically was born in 1883 in Baldock, a well-known historian. Now what he did was, he became the guardian of this particular site. So much so that he approached the diocese, who actually has control of this part of land. It's actually church land. But he got a lifetime lease. Unheard of in that day. We're going back to now the early 1900s, so just 115 years ago per se. And he got a lifetime lease for this land and the woodland attached to it. He was that passionate about it. He's a historian. He knows what I know, and he's looked after this site for that period of time. We have stories of ghostly monks. Monks walking through staircases that don't exist. Interesting screams of a child, apparitions of a child. We have stories of the nun that walks endlessly through and what's known as the portal, straight through the portal, and she carries on walking from whence we came, if I dare use the terms from whence we came. So when we look at the chapel itself, it's a lot of people say it's a couple of old rocks in a woodland, in a forest, but there's much more to that. Now what was interesting with Reginald Hine is he put up a sign, and I'm just going to read that sign to you that he put up, which is quite odd. Now we're thinking of the early 1900s, we're going into Victorian periods. We're saying, well, hang on, here's a guy, historian, that now puts up the most weirdest, oddest sign to try and keep people off of his land. And what he says is, trespassers and scurrilous persons take warning, for I will proceed against them with the utmost rigour of the law, and after my death and burial I will endeavour in all ghostly ways to protect and haunt its hallowed walls. It's a very strange thing to say, isn't it? That he's going to, and even whilst I'm talking this and reading his own words to him, I get a sense that there's something quite present here. There's something quite, the air's quite still. I can hear the birds, but there's certainly an oddity about the air. Because that is quite a strange thing to write, isn't it? That back in the 1900s, no one would have actually thought. The Victorians were very much into the death. They did the photographs, as we know, of their dead people, which allegedly let their souls be released. And they kept rather strange photographs of people in coffins and things and laid out. Rabbits, for example, had big, thick claws. There was no such lovely. There was no nicety in any type of ornament in the Victorian period. It was very much that any animal, especially a wildlife animal, was considered to be almost demonic. But they were quite obsessed with the demonic culture, and that's when it started to sort of come into play. The areas of witchcraft and things in the modern times. It was almost like a revitalisation, a sort of a reawakening, I guess, of what was happening at that point in time. So here we have Reginald Hine, a historian from Baldock, well known, lots of books written, leaving this note and saying that he's got a lifetime lease to look after this site. Historians, archaeologists, that's what they do, isn't it? It's not about what's around you, it's about what's under you, what's here, what lies beneath. That's more interesting, isn't it? So I'm just going to try something just to see whether we can get any type of action. I can certainly get a different sense. I'll pass this to my learned friend. I can certainly get a different sense here of. I get the feeling that we're not welcome here, that's for sure. That we shouldn't be here. That's the first sense, I guess. There's certainly enough stinging nettles to get you up here through the way in the mundane world. If you can battle the stinging nettles in this time of year, you're halfway in. But when we first arrived, one of our co-researchers said he heard someone laughing. Now, sadly, none of us did actually hear, but I have no reason to disbelieve him. So I believe he is telling the truth. That it was some kind of laughter or groan. About 10 minutes ago, offline, there was a noise in the woods there, as if people were marching through the stinging nettles. That sort of noise I would imagine from the 1700s, 1800s, wading through the fields to get to the chapel. But it's gone fairly still again as I'm talking. And again, we're always going to be looking for EVP. Perhaps we should bring a white box sometime, but I'm just looking at EVP for a moment. So is there anyone here that wants to speak to us and tell us anything really, about why we shouldn't be here? I think that's more important to say. Clearly you don't want us here. Perhaps Reginald would like to speak, or the djinn that professes to be Reginald would like to say something. Now, bearing in mind that you're seeing me in the here and now, saying this on this particular movie clip, as it were, that Janice will kindly edit and upload onto line for you to see this. But at this moment in time, I might not be able to hear the voices that we'll capture on the electronic machinery at a later point in time. Sadly, I did bring a recording device, but I've left it in the car, and the car's about half a mile that way down into the actual pub's car park, so I don't fancy the trek back to get the little radar detecting device for radiation, which is what we're looking for. But I don't know, I certainly get a sense there's something interesting has happened here. Most of the places we go to, I always feel like we're welcomed and we have a sense of belongingness, but this place is pretty nasty, to say the least. It's got a protection here, but it clearly doesn't want to be revealed. And perhaps that's why the diocese doesn't put it on the map so much. It is hard to find. And so therefore, why? Always ask yourself the question, why? The reason has to be that the people that be, in the loosest term, don't want you to find it, don't want you to sense it, and don't want you to see it.